So now how do we take that package of safety and manufacturing and bring it to other patient populations? And so that's all part of the risk reduction of our drug development now. It's focused on those pivotal trials for multiple shots on goal.
Welcome to Seeking Alpha's CEO interviews, informed conversations with the best and brightest CEOs in the publicly traded markets. Quality of leadership is a decisive factor in stock performance. Our show provides intimate and in-depth investing discussions with industry leaders across all sectors of the marketplace. We publish excerpts on social media platforms and the full conversations on seekingalpha.com or on our highly rated Seeking Alpha mobile app under CEO interviews.
Welcome to Seeking Alpha. I'm your host, Jesse Redmond. Today, I'm joined by Lisa Conte, CEO of Jaguar Health. Lisa, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Nice to see you.
So I'm excited to learn a bit about the company. Can you share your background a bit and just tell us something about about Jaguar?
Sure. Well, what the company does is all drug discovery from plants used traditionally in tropical areas. So leveraging knowledge of healers and shamans to demystify these traditional plants and medicines that have been in man for thousands of years and bring them into the Western medical society and then eventually back to all populations in need. And then to delve into my background, I have a science and a business degree. I was working in venture capital when I was climbing Kilimanjaro, and I saw one of these makeshift pharmacies halfway up that was having some traditional meds to help people deal with the altitude sickness. And that was a light bulb moment 32 and a half years ago to go exactly into the business model that I just described, to demystify these traditional medicines. More likely, that was the philosophy, more likely to be safe and effective in man because they've been a man for thousands of years.
And how did you get focused on the diarrhea space, if you will?
So the way we did our drug discovery in the very beginning, our basic enabling technology, working with shamans and healers, was to send teams of ethnobotanists, botanists who study how natives use plant material, and Western trained physicians with an anthropological, a cultural sensitivity. And we presented cases, medical cases, signs and symptoms of diseases, and then asked the healers, what do they use for these particular types of symptoms? So we didn't go in and with a rifle shot and say, what do you got for cancer? That type of thing didn't work, but a real culturally appropriate relationship. And obviously with infectious diseases, diarrhea is a symptom that is very easily seen, cholera outbreaks throughout the decades. And so we collected about 100 plants per year in 3 different areas. One was diabetes, where you could see sweet urine disease. That's a symptom you could see. One was pain, which is obviously very easy to see. And then one was infectious diseases and different symptoms you see from that. And then we prioritized when we brought them back home for all the features necessary to have a pharmaceutical. Can it be sustainably harvested? Is there a proprietary position? What is the mechanism of action? Is it unique? Is it a new way of treating or curing disease? And Profelimer, which is our lead compound, our anti-diarrheal compound for normalizing GI function, kept landing at the top of the stack of those different prioritization questions. And then ultimately we're a commercial stage company now. We do have the product on the market in the United States for the specialty indication of HIV-related diarrhea, a chronic indication, but it's a pipeline within a product because it's this novel way of normalizing gut function. So it can benefit cancer patients, it can benefit Crohn's disease, IBD, IBS, rare diseases like short bowel syndrome, congenital diarrheal disorders, and even cholera. So it's keeping us quite busy on both the commercial and the development front at the same time.
And how prevalent, for lack of a better term, is the diarrhea problem? And what's the problem? And what's missing from the existing solutions? Or maybe what are the bad side effects of the existing solutions?
So relevant to the conversation we had when we started, the products that you think of for diarrhea when you go to the drugstore, Imodium or loperamide, these are opioids.
Mm-hmm.
And so all the downsides of opioids, of course, addiction, they make you a little loopy, you're not supposed to do certain types of driving, and they work by the mechanism of constipation. And so that can't work in a chronic situation, and it can't work in a very severely ill patient where you don't want to interfere with their other life-saving medicine. So while Profelimer has shown really nice clinical data from the most mild acute traveler's diarrhea to the most severe chronic situations, we have focused on the chronic severe situations because the mechanism, the benefits of the mechanism, and this tolerability and the local action of the product are so much more valued in that situation. So we have it on the market, which was fast-tracked by the FDA for diarrhea, which can be a chronic situation, an inflammatory situation in people living with HIV/AIDS. Specialty market in the US, relatively small market. It's in a phase 3 clinical trial right now for the very important indication of cancer therapy-related diarrhea, and looking at the diarrhea that is induced with these targeted medications that are used chronically for years at a time to keep patients in remission. And they all have very, very large side effects of diarrhea and GI dysfunction, to the point where 40% of the time, the patient have to go off their life-saving medication or go to a subtherapeutic dose or switch to another medication because of the side effect of diarrhea. This is not garden variety, you and I had a bad Mexican meal. This can be severe enough to put a patient in the hospital for rehydration. It can lead to organ shutdown. There have even been some patients who have died from the dehydration in clinical trials. So now we're getting into something that is not just quality of life, which is very important, and not just patient comfort, but is very important, but can have an impact on the outcome of the disease. So again, there's nothing else that's been tested and approved specifically in these chronic situations.
And so how does a doctor decide? Mytesi, is that how you pronounce it? Is the brand name? Okay.
Mytesi brand name, yeah.
Mytesi. Okay. So how does a doctor decide if he's going to prescribe Mytesi or one of the other range of medications out there for diarrhea?
First, they have to know about Mytesi. So, that's commercialization. The innovation is on the discovery and the development, and then we realized, okay, we've got to be innovative on the commercialization side as well. So, but your point is right on. We all think of, and healthcare professionals are no different. What do you use for diarrhea? You just plug it up or you bind it up in some way. And what Profelimer does is it normalizes water flow, it normalizes ion flow, and it's locally acting, meaning you take it orally, it's a pill, but it goes into the intestine, normalizes these different disruptions that have occurred, and then it is released. So you don't get any blood levels, you don't get any drug-drug interactions, you don't get secondary metabolites that are causing problems later on. Not an antibiotic, you don't get resistance, not an opioid, so you don't have the constipation risk associated with an opioid. So it's not only making healthcare professionals aware of this product, but it's a totally new way of thinking about treating gut disorders and potentially curing gut disorders from, as I said, very mild watery diarrhea to inflammatory issues that can be associated with HIV patients, enteropathy, with chronically insulted guts in cancer patients or Crohn's disease patients. And a new indication that we've taken on with the rare disease world of short bowel syndrome, where you're trying to provide greater opportunity for the patients to absorb the nutrients of life in a very, very short, limited gut because of whatever reason they've ended up with a short bowel.
And so I'm looking at a slide in your presentation, and it shows all the different trials that are underway, the pipelines, I guess maybe is the better way to phrase it. So it seems like you have the core solution, which is the Profelimer Mytesi, and then you're getting it tested. It's in the pipeline for a range of different applications. Am I looking at that correctly?
Exactly right, and it's part of the risk reduction as a pharmaceutical company that's been around now for 30 years. 30 years ago was basic enabling technology and all the risk associated with that. Now we have a compound, Profelimer, that is approved by the FDA. It's approved for chronic indication. Obviously, we have the supply chain in hand because it is plant-based. organic, sustainably harvested, fair trade, and it's an FDA-approved drug that you could find in essentially any pharmacy in the United States. So now how do we take that package of safety and manufacturing and bring it to other patient populations? And so that's all part of the risk reduction of our drug development now. It's focused on those pivotal trials for multiple shots on goal. And the two that we're focusing on right now, can't do everything at once, we would love to, can't do everything at once, is cancer therapy related diarrhea in the United States, which is in the midst of a phase 3 clinical trial. Patient enrollment should be over in about a year. That's a big, 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 big moment to get to that very important patient population, classic unmet medical need, nothing out there. And then we established a company called Napo Therapeutics in Europe, and that's focusing on the rare disease business model under license from Jaguar and pursuing first short bowel syndrome, which has orphan drug designation. Classic rare disease business model where it's a small population. These patients are very sick, chronically, very expensive, so a higher reimbursement opportunity to benefit their lives and to benefit the healthcare expenditures.
Is crofelemer an expensive medication, expensive to produce?
It is more expensive than just synthesizing a molecule. So it does have a higher cost of goods. It's not like a biologic cost of goods. However, there is a very important benefit of scale, economy of scale.
Mm-hmm.
So as we get to more patient populations, meaning cancer, short bowel syndrome, IBD, Crohn's disease, and as we get to more geographies and make more crofelemer, we'll keep the manufacturing centralized and it'll bring the cost of goods down.
And do you have multiple suppliers, or what does the supply chain look like?
The supply chain starts in South America.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, our main country that we supply from is Peru, though we've had supply from Colombia, Ecuador, Venezuela, Bolivia. Right now, though, we could have a $1 billion product tomorrow. We'd use about 1/10 of 1% of what's naturally occurring. We have, the only, not the only, but one of the good things about being in the pharmaceutical business where it takes so long to develop a drug and go through all the FDA process, we've had plenty of time to optimize the sustainable harvest of this product and really bring indigenous owned and forest dwelling individual owned businesses into business to supply the raw plant material in a sustainable way. So for example, every tree that comes down, 2 more are planted. So we collect the raw plant material in Peru, in South America, then it goes on a boat, and there's 2 different places that it can go. The main place right now is India, Glenmark Pharmaceuticals, where it's made into the active pharmaceutical ingredient, and we're bringing up a secondary manufacturer which has a much greater history with plant-based, plant being tree and bush, plant-based pharmaceuticals in Italy called Indana. Then that API right now comes to the United States and it goes to a finished product manufacturer where it's made into its pill, into its bottle. And then right now, since the US is the only place we have approval, it gets distributed through the United States.
And my sister's Chihuahua, I think, might benefit from your products. Can you tell us a little bit about the pet applications?
I'm so glad you asked. The main business is the human business, and we have these 2 really important milestones in about a year, one on cancer therapy related diarrhea, and one is the completion of a proof of concept, which can lead to patient access in Europe. So one of the reasons why we put the short bowel syndrome rare disease license in Europe. So 2 major pipeline human indications in the next year. So what's going on this year? It's the year of the dog. So it's the Chinese year or whatever. It's our year of the dog. And we're very excited. We got our first crofelemer formulation for dogs for, interestingly, chemotherapy-induced diarrhea in dogs, approved in December. So that product revenue will start flowing in, expected in the 2nd quarter of this year. So just around the corner. We were just on the phone this morning talking to some key opinion leaders. And what's interesting is the mechanism, the site at which crofelemer normalizes gut function is highly conserved amongst mammals, certainly between humans and dogs. So the product works remarkably the same in dogs, which is a great predictive model of the human situation. And you have the same thing in dogs. About 40% of the time, the dog has to be taken off their chemotherapy because they can't tolerate the GI dysfunction. They can't tolerate the diarrhea. And unlike humans that are sometimes a little reticent to talk about their bowel function, a little reticent to say the word diarrhea, you have a dog with diarrhea in an urban setting. Nobody has any talking about poop. It's all about poop. So it's about the dog's comfort, because you're not going, most dog owners are not going to try to extend the dog's life if they can't keep the dog comfortable. But then it's also the quality of life for the dog, so they're not getting dehydrated, and the quality of life for the family. You don't want, everything to be messed up around the house. So it's a really, really exciting and important indication, and we're having a great deal of fun and bringing a great deal of awareness to the whole issue of cancer in canines. There's a lot of information about demographics, different types of dogs, little dogs, mixed dogs, what makes them more prone to cancers, what are the options out there, both dog-specific medications as well as human medications that are used in the dog. But then how do you keep the whole quality of life and the comfort and the medicine able to do its thing? And that's Canalevia, Profelimer for dogs.
And how is the landscape for competition kind of broadly in this space, not just about dogs, but overall with plant-based therapies for diarrhea? Are others researching and submitting similar ideas?
I'm often asked, what's the competitive landscape? And I feel like such a silly person saying there's no competitive, there's no other anti-secretories. That's the novel mechanism of action. There's no other anti-secretories in development or certainly on the market in the human or the animal area. And the tolerability and as I said, the safety and the normalization, that's such a key word that's in the label, the normalization of gut function that crofelemer provides gives it such broad applications to so many different populations. So what did people do before crofelemer, or if they don't know about crofelemer or it's not indicated in the particular patient population, people work around it. So certainly in the HIV population where this community has, dealt with so much for so many decades, you often hear the new normal. This is my new normal. I carry extra underwear with me. I never go, I know where every toilet is within 5 minutes of my walk to work or my favorite restaurant. And that's terrible. I don't live with a new normal. I live with normal. So it's, trying to let both the patient community and the health community know that there is a new alternative out there. You don't have to work around it. You don't have to just depend on changing your diet. You certainly don't have to plug yourself up with opioids to get through a plane ride or to get through a wedding. This is something that can be used safely, chronically, and just normalize your life and your gut function.
And Lisa, one of the challenges we often see in smaller biotech stuff is remaining liquid while you go through these long trials, waiting for these big payoffs. Can you talk a little bit about where you are with your cash position and what the burn rate looks like?
Yeah, the cash, the last reported cash was about $30 million. So we're in good shape to get through to those two key, what I call transforming a pipeline to a reality, because right now biotech in general, certainly relative to last year, doesn't seem to be valuing pipelines. And so how do you turn a pipeline into reality? And in our case, it's a product, Mytesi, that's already approved. You get that primary endpoint in a pivotal trial. That's like a signal of the reality, because it's literally the same product. It'll be a supplemental NDA. Short bowel syndrome, I do want to mention, short bowel syndrome is crofelemer, but it's a different product. So Mytesi is a pill that you swallow. Short bowel syndrome patients, this is a catastrophic situation where patients, you and I in a normal situation have maybe 20, 25 feet of intestine. Short bowel syndrome could have 5 feet or less, could have as little as 30 centimeters. And so they don't have enough real estate to absorb the nutrients of life, the proteins, the fats, the carbohydrates. And so what we're focused on is intestinal failure patients who are living on parenteral nutrition, often 7 days a week, 20 hours a day. Can we decrease the amount of time that they are on that parenteral nutrition by normalizing some of the gut function and allowing them more time to do their own absorption. In that situation, you don't want the insult of a pill. You want it to be as small, a highly concentrated volume as possible. So it's a highly concentrated liquid formulation of Profelimer, which is a different product, a different business model that will look for an endpoint of improving the patient's opportunity to absorb their own nutrients of life, decrease the amount of time that they have to be on parenteral nutrition.
And looking back, I noticed that, I think it was back in 2015, this was a $22,000 stock on a split adjusted basis. And I'm curious kind of broadly what's happened over the last 7 years that's taken us to where we are today. I realize it's a big question, but I'm curious if there's any kind of big picture takeaways you could talk about.
Yeah, I can try to give a headline view there. When I mentioned when we started the company, our innovation was on drug discovery. Our basic enabling technology was working with healers and cultural sensitivity in the rainforest. And then development, when you have a novel mechanism of action, you need to make sure that you have a trial design and an endpoint that matches a novel mechanism of action. So for example, you wouldn't want to have an endpoint in a diarrhea trial with Profelimer that is looking at stopping up all bowel function like an opioid, like an Imodium might do, because that's not how we work. We make normal stool formation. Our innovation was not in commercialization, so we had out-licensed the product for commercialization to another party. And our view was that they felt that they had a competitive situation and they tried to slow boat and kill our product, which was going to kill the company. It resulted in a very big legal dispute that went on for 5 years. We finally prevailed in settlement, got the product back with a great deal of debt. And so what we did is we didn't get there overnight. We weren't going to get out of it overnight. So we had to finance through that debt. It was a very large amount of debt. Brought along some long-term shareholders with us who can continue to support the stock. And it resulted in several reverse splits. And then it was all cleaned up. The balance sheet got completely cleaned up in like November or December of 2020, getting my pandemic years confused. And that's when the stock started to really flourish until the most recent hit that I think has hit the industry in general.
Right. And what are the concerns that you have, Lisa? You know the company as well as anyone. What keeps you at night? What do you worry about?
The thing that I worry about, if I do worry, is we have 10 people who've been together for over 15 years. 3 of us have been together for over 30 years. We know every last little piece of data, every little piece of history that has occurred around the major asset in the company, which is Profelimer. So we're like a little big pharmaceutical company. We're selling a product. We have a supply chain from the rainforest. We have quality control associated with that. We've got major clinical trials going on in the United States for cancer. We're collaborating with our licensee in Europe. We have a cholera program going forward. How can we do so much with a relatively small team? We're less than 50 people. It's because there is so much institutional knowledge. So what I worry about is when we bring in new people, giving them enough time to absorb this full history so they can move with as much knowledge and we don't have to reinvent the wheel when we bring a new person in.
Do you worry about the trials taking longer or that you won't get approval?
This is what I don't worry about. I don't worry about, does Profelimer work and is it safe? I, as a CEO, can say I'm very confident that we have quite an effective product based on the mechanism of action of the different patient populations that we're looking at in extreme tolerability from dozens of published clinical trials and of course being on the market with thousands of patients. So it's a matter of getting the trial design right, as I said, for the mechanism of action. And our chief scientific officer, who designed our cancer trial ongoing and is very involved in the short bowel syndrome trial design, designed the successful trial in HIV for the current indication of Mytesi. So I don't worry about that. What I do worry about, because we do a lot of risk management, We call it a tomato meeting. What are all the things that could go wrong, big and little? What are the impacts, and what are the ones you're willing to spend money or have the ability to mitigate? Who saw the pandemic coming and how it would slow up enrollment in clinical trials because centers, in particular cancer centers, were getting closed down? So we did, for example, there was a phase 2 investigator-initiated trial that was going on with Profelimer in breast cancer patients, with Mytesi in breast cancer patients. Not our trial, it was an investigator-initiated trial. And we thought that trial was going to be over 2 years ago. And it finally did complete, and there was a very nice presentation and result at the San Antonio Breast Cancer Conference in December of 2021. We thought that would have been done in 2019, and before we had started our pivotal trial. But what was really nice about that poster and that presentation is we all said, the investigators, third-party investigators, as well as our chief medical officer, if we had known the results before we started the pivotal cancer trial, which is called On Target, before we had started On Target, we would have designed it exactly the same way. So thank goodness for that.
And finally, Lisa, can you share with us what you're most excited about for 2022?
I'm going to just recap what I said. The mobilization of a pipeline for a product that we already know has such wonderful tolerability, and to expand it to other patients in need, because we are only approved for the HIV indication. And you see and you meet in your personal life and your professional life so many people who can benefit from this product. And in order to educate their healthcare professionals about it, we have to get those indications. So we are in the final stages of being able to get this product to cancer patients and short bowel syndrome patients within, or certainly data within, about a 12 to 15 month period of time. And so that is my big vision, company, aspirations, what we've been working on our whole career here at Jaguar. That's my excitement. In the near term, my excitement every day about what we can do for dogs, and a whole new world of communicating and educating about the need to manage gut function diarrhea in the patient. In this case, the patient happens to be a dog, but it's the same halo effect as you see in humans as well.
Well, this has been fantastic, Lisa. Thanks for joining us on Seeking Alpha.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. It was fun to talk.